Hi. Okay, this video is going to be specifically about the ladders on the mast, on the foremast there, and on the main mast. Those rungs and those rungs there. Okay, so I don't know how common the exact nature of the shape of those rungs is from boat to boat, but I'm guessing it's not radically different. So what I'm doing here might be very similar for a whole number of similar type boats. I was hoping for a little bit more information, but I mean, I guess it's as good to just look at the pictures there. And as I said, I was going to do a couple of trials. So my first point in this video is trials. And I'll speak about what I've done here, but I just want to show you. So I've put 3 different rungs on there, 3 different shapes and qualities. The top one you can see is obviously completely not good, visually not appealing at all. The next 2 are better, and they've got slightly different shape. They could both pass. The middle one is the very nice one. They're not glued in, so that's just sort of press fitted in. And this bottom one, so I'll show you what that looks like. And it's not great, but that's sort of what I went with in the end. And the little holes are only about 45 degrees apart or something. And each time you put it in and pull it out, of course it would damage the wood a little bit more. So you want to do all of your practicing on, in this case I've just got a pine dowel. So top one has got a curvature which is not great, and the legs which go into the although I just about come out the other side, they're a little bit, it's a little bit long, and it's sort of, I could get it in further, but it's a rung which is a little bit far out from the mast. So what you want to do is practice with holes. I first thought I was going to be using that gap apart, and I tried to do it using this very first rung with the length that they had stated, and you can see that it doesn't have that curve to push long pieces in. It's supposed to sort of just grab onto the, I don't know if I'll be able to get that one in there, but you can imagine for yourself that the amount of, it's not going to, no point, the amount of wire of rung that's inside the dowel is not very great. So the first thing I had to do was use the length, which they said 20 millimeters, make a rung and just see what happens. And then I made a version 2 and a 3 and a 4, and that's sort of what you'll need to do on whatever ship you're doing. And decide, are you going to try and get it to go in at about an angles like that. So the best that I was finding was to be able to almost push that rung in from the front. So as you push this in, it'll widen out slightly, and then it'll sort of clamp into that hole. But it's almost going in. I mean, I was pondering just putting it in straight, and the only reason for not going straight on these two curves here, on these two last bends, those two little parts which go right into the mast, is the amount of bend that you're putting on, and that bit of bend that will then be visible outside the mast. So if you can have less, like for instance, if you could do that and actually get it into the mast, but I can't get it into the mast like that. So if you've got some magic trick to get it into the mast like that, because what it requires is then for you to widen it, but now it can't get into your two holes like that, and then it would be bending the rung on this side. So in the end, this is what I've found works. So I would count on doing at least five or six rungs till you're quite happy with the process, and till you're happy with the shape and size that you've gone for. Now in the end, I was cutting rungs that are about 26 millimeters of wire. That's off this wire. 1 millimeter brass, just measure 25 millimeter bits, and that gives you that. So that's the pre-final stage before I then bend those last two parts to go in. At this stage I'm getting the rung shape correct and not the mast insert part correct, but I'll just show you how I did that part first. So with the trials, I then get a position, and I've put masking tape on these pliers. I'll just show you the inside of the pliers there. So they've got a good flat section, and then they've got the little ridged section, and then they've got a cut-off part there. And I'm using that flat section, but it just happens to be that size pliers. Otherwise I would have had to look for a different one. And I'll go through that process now on this last rung that I'm making. So after cutting it, it's not straight. So there's that. So first process is using that flat part. All I'm doing is just going over it a bunch of times, squashing it. And I mean, visually you won't see anything on the brass. It doesn't damage the brass in any way whatsoever. It just straightens it. Okay, that's just about done. And you'll very quickly see, I mean, some are very quick to straighten. So that's very nice and straight now. Then I position that at the point at which I'd then practiced with my rungs, such that it's in the pliers, and in my case I'm just on the inside of the masking tape. That's where I started off. Let's sort of adjust your masking tape till you've got the correct spot, and then visually looking to make sure that your left and right sides are equal, and I'm holding it quite tight. You don't want this thing shifting. Using eyeball mark 1, you're not going to get it perfect every time, and it'll be slightly off once you've made your rung. You'll see, but just judging that you've got that there, and then bend those two edges over. So now it's like that. Okay, then I shift it forward slightly in the pliers so that I can get a little more bend, because the pliers, you know, restrict you at 90 degrees, so you wouldn't be able to get it to go further, and then a bit further more. Now I'm at about that position, and go a little bit more, and we're heading towards a 60-degree triangle. And due to the experiments that I've done, the shape and curvature of the rung on its corners is quite, it sort of looks best when it's about like that. You can make a lot sharper turn, you can make more. I'll show you one, get back to that one now. So this one, the curvature around the corners of the rung is greater, and it's somewhat acceptable. And if it's too sharp a turn, it doesn't look great either. So now I'm at that, and then you can just bend it a little bit more till, I mean, there's no particular point in getting them to touch at this point, except that if I position it, at roughly where it's going to go into the, you can see that that's not where it's going to be going in. It's too near the edge, too near the edges of the mast, so it needs to go a bit more in, and then like that. So that's why it then starts looking like that. So my first step is now, and I've done all of them here, I've done some shorter ones, some that are only about 24 millimeters, because as the shaft tapers, as the mast tapers, there's less inside the mast to have those two pieces of brass. There's less space inside there. So I haven't taped, this is just the test piece. Probably won't be tapering this particular one, but as I had mentioned I was going to do was, on my actual mast, draw the lines, drill all the holes before tapering, make sure that all of my rungs fit in before tapering, probably even sort of place them in order so that I know which one went where, because some of them are going to be slightly shorter, and in the event that some of those longer bits are a bit too long for the mast and they stick out, I'd need to cut and file them before that goes in. So this is my plan at the moment. Is practice is sort of finished. The actual mast, which is then this is one of the masts, actually this is the foremast, yes, so this is the one that gets most. This is preparing to do my tapering, but I'll take it out of here, draw the lines, drill the holes. Now regarding the drilling of the holes and then doing the final tweaking of the rungs, this is, I don't want to damage them too much. I want to try and retain the good rung shape while also getting that last, from that shape down to about that shape. What was I saying? Lost my train of thought there. Okay, what I was going to say there was, and I'll have to draw this for you, relating to the holes. So this is roughly what you're aiming for with those parts that go into the mast. Now if you did this as I first thought I was going to be doing, if you do it like that, the two pieces of brass that you push into your mast it works as long as they're both short enough to not get in each other's way. And that's sort of a lot of trial and error that you want to actually avoid. So you don't want to be sitting there and tweaking the lengths of your little rungs just because you've done a tighter triangle on the inside, as opposed to doing that sort of thing. But what about drilling right through the mast? Now, my thinking there is that with the tapering of the mast, you might expose the holes anyway. So even if you'd only drilled up to sort of a little bit inwards of there, and then you're tapering that away so that that's now the new mast edge, you'd be exposing those holes anyway. And is it the worst thing to have the hole which you then fill afterwards? Well, you know, imagine for yourself that on that mast you've put your rungs through. You have probably filed off any sharp or rough edges off there, even if any were exposed, and you now have the little bits of brass showing on the outside of the mast. You could fill it and paint it, or you could decide that that's just not the way you want to go, in which case you're going to have to make sure that the length of your holes is quite short of the edge, and you're going to use less brass into the mast. But the downside of that is that the likelihood is that your rungs may be able to wiggle more before gluing. Slightly less of a fit, but I mean, with the super glue, you know, you should be okay. So these ones, you know, that's fitted without going through, which is not difficult on the thicker end of the mast when it's still 6 millimeters. Once that's down to about 4, that's you know, a little bit more delicate. So just points of consideration. I'm not sure how it's going to work out when I try and do them all. By the way, if you're not sure about stopping your drill from going through, if this was your drill, which it isn't, this is just a piece of wire that I'm showing you, and you measured, say, 4 millimeters, and you put that on your drill, obviously rolling it nicely through, but I won't do it completely on there. You put a piece of masking tape on there so that as you're drilling with, and I'll be using a small hand Dremel, as you're drilling into the mast, you stop when you get to the masking tape, and if you were accurate, you shouldn't go through. Now, of course, that's not, you know, you're going to have to plan that a little bit, because that length isn't 6 millimeters anymore. That might be a bit less, 5.5 or even 5. And if you want to make sure you don't go through on the thick part, you might have to go to 4 millimeters. And when your mast is thinner, and it is actually only 4, you might have to shift that to only go down to 3 millimeters. If you can manage on your practices to get a rung to go in without bending it to do that, and keep it like that, then you should have quite nice rungs. And that is more or less what I can think about. If you make a few rungs, you'll sort of realize that some of them really aren't very great shape. That it is possible to muck them up a little bit, but being brass, it's quite easy to fix. And in the end, so I've made about 25, 26 of these, or with the practice ones, almost 30. And just with that right amount of curvature on there, the right rung, you could go a slightly shorter rung. And also your distance from the mast. So you want to get a consistent bend so that you've got a consistent distance from the mast. So if you look down your mast, that is definitely not what you want to be seeing, rungs all over the place. You want to have them pretty nicely in line. And that starts off with, of course, drilling your holes correctly based on a line that you draw there. So we hope that comes out well. It's not the worst if it's slightly off. It's not the most obvious part of the boat. But hopefully when I'm finished this, I will have a nice foremast with 18 rungs or whatever it was, and about 7 on the main mast. Okay, that is it on ladder rungs. Cheers.